Welcome to Possible's at-home tree planting. My name's Neil, I'm a campaigner at Possible. We run lots of projects and campaigns, and they're all with the aim of helping more people to take more action on climate change. You might have heard of our Solar Schools project. We also run campaigns such as opposing the ban on onshore wind. We build solar-powered railways, and we also run community tree planting events, which is why we're here today. So we're here in sunny Wales to plant a tree today, but we're not alone. We have people all over the country who have signed up for this event who will be planting trees along with us in their own gardens. So trees don't just make our surroundings more beautiful, they also provide a great home and habitat for wildlife, and crucially, they help to capture carbon from the air. And if we're going to tackle climate change, we're going to need a lot more trees. So I'm very lucky today to be joined by my faithful companion here, Wolfie. He loves to help with digging, so hopefully he will come in handy a little bit later. And we're also extremely lucky to have our videographer today is Hugh Richards. Hugh is a gardening YouTuber and author.
Yep.
Would you like to introduce yourself, Hugh?
Yeah, absolutely. So my big passion is trying to get people excited about growing their own food. And no matter what you have, whether it's a windowsill or a back garden or perhaps even bigger, the kind of connection that you have. And I'm really excited because we're going to be planting an apple tree today. And an apple tree kind of bridges a gap between us as humans and the natural world, because so many pollinators and other insects rely on apple trees and apples. And we as humans can also eat the apples. So really excited to be a part of this. But I'm just going to head back behind the camera to keep on bossing you.
Brilliant, thanks Hugh. So we actually recorded this a couple of days ago, which means that I can be on hand right now to answer your questions. So if you have any, just pop them in the comments below, and hopefully I can either answer the question or point you in the right direction. You'll also be able to re-watch this after the live stream, so we'll post this on the Facebook event page. So we'll need a few things to get started. So first of all, obviously the tree, and we will talk a bit more about that in a minute. You'll also need a spade. I've got quite a good one here, which I quite like. It's got little shoulders on, so if you're doing lots of digging at the end of the day, it's not going to hurt your feet too much. I'm also wearing sturdy boots, so that's going to help me with my digging. We have a stake, which is going to help support the tree over its first year or two, and the type of stake that you will need will depend on the tree. So we'll talk about that in a minute as well. A little lump hammer, so that will help you get the stake in the ground. And this little thing, so this is a rubber tie, and this will help to support the tree to the stake. And this thing, it's a nifty little spiral guard. And this will just help protect your tree if you have things like rabbits around, which could eat the bark from around the bottom. So this will depend. You only need one of these if you have rabbits in your neighbourhood. If not, it might not be necessary. We also have some compost, so that will help to feed the roots of the tree, to help it get established. This is good quality peat-free compost. Very important that we're not using peat. And we also have some water. So the tree we have here today is a lovely apple tree. It's a Braeburn, and we should get some lovely red and green apples, probably about November time. Although in its first year, it might not fruit. That could be come a bit later. Yeah, it's a nice little variety. It's really juicy. It's really sweet, but it's got a nice kind of like sour flavour to it as well. It's really good. Obviously this one didn't come from this tree. Fortunately this one was shop bought, but we will hopefully get lots of fruit out of this tree. So this tree is about 3 years old. You can expect to get a decent harvest from it after about 7 years. But the great thing about apple trees is that you can get a lovely harvest from it for decades. So if you're growing apple trees for the first time, the thing to look out for is self-pollinating varieties like this one. And there'll be a list on the screen right now telling you what different types are available. So when you're buying your apple tree, they can grow to different heights. So there are a few things that you need to look out for. Hugh, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So The thing that you don't want to do is to buy an apple tree and you've got a really small back garden and it ends up becoming a giant. So what you want to look out for is something called rootstocks, and you've got different numbers. So the smallest, if you want to grow apples in a big container, you want a full dwarf apple tree. Now that rootstock is going to be M27, so it only grows to around 2 meters high. Next, for semi-dwarfing, which grows to about 2.5 meters high, that is going to be an M9 rootstock. Now if you've perhaps got a little bit of perhaps a moderate garden or an allotment, you might then want to look at an M26 variety. So that grows to around 3 to 4 meters high. And then if you have a much bigger space, like this cooking apple here, which grows to around 4 to 5 meters high, that's going to be an MM106 rootstock.
So there are a couple of different ways that you can buy your tree. So they come either bare rooted or in a container. The bare rooted ones, which is actually what this is, even though it's in a container at the moment, just because we put it in the container just so you can keep the roots nice and moist over the last couple of days while it's been waiting to be planted. But if I picked this tree up, you would see all the roots and the soil would just fall off. When you receive your bare rooted plant, you just need to make sure you keep those roots dark and covered and moist. So you can either keep them in a compost bag and keep them moist there, or you can put them in some soil, as I've done here. This is called heeling in. Now, if you haven't heeled in your tree, you just need to make sure that you've let it soak in a bucket of water for about 12 hours before, and that will just make sure that those roots stay nice and hydrated. Now, bare root trees, you want to make sure that you're planting those between November and March in the UK. But containered trees, you have a bit more leeway. So you could plant them throughout the year, although it's better to do this in winter. So apple trees enjoy a lot of sunshine. So make sure you try and find a spot in your garden that gets plenty of sun and also a bit of a sheltered spot from the wind. If you are planting in your yard, then just try and ensure that the spot that you pick is south facing if possible. So now for the fun bit, time to get digging. So Hugh, do you have any top tips for me?
Yeah, one thing actually is if you're going to be digging directly in the ground is to actually not do a circular hole. You don't need to. You can just make a square hole that's slightly wider than the roots. It doesn't need to be that much wider. I'd say perhaps twice the width. The reason why you want to do a square hole is not only is it kind of simpler to do than having to create a perfect circle, but also when the roots hit a corner of the square, it helps to actually encourage a strong root growth. So you're in theory going to have a stronger tree. So if you want to start cutting a bit of a hole,
great, yep.
Square.
Yep. How deep am I going?
As deep as a spade.
Okay.
And we'll take it from there. It's always fun getting started.
Yeah, tell me about it.
There you go. And then lift it up and move it just to the side,
Yeah.
and push it down again.
Great.
So you've cut out a nice square there. Now, in order to make it easier to lift out, I then want you to cut in the middle, going up both ways. So you kind of create a cross within a square, so you can imagine it like a window.
Okay,
You know,
yeah.
That joke, what is 1 + 1 equals a window, and that's the exact shape you're trying to make in the soil there. Because it'll just make it a lot easier to lift it up, rather than trying to remove everything all in one go.
Great, yeah, perfect. Thanks. It's the best workout I've had all month.
So you can now see that kind of window shape. Now what you want to do is to start removing the turf and the soil, but what you want to do is to try and place it gently or neatly all in one pile. So
Okay.
instead of making a mess all the way around, you can put it all in one pile. If you're worried about mess on the lawn, you can actually get a big sheet of cardboard and place it on there. But here, we're not going to bother. So just make a bit of a pile, I'd say, on the opposite side there, and just go deep and gently pull out all of the sections.
Great, okay, sounds good.
And lever it back, you can see it starting to pop out.
Oh, nice. Yeah. It's like slicing birthday cake.
I know. To be honest, I find this more exciting. So you've got 4 really nice slices, and you can see actually how effective it is, and it's a lot easier than trying to cut out a perfect circle.
Yeah.
So the hole, there's still some soil left, so all we want to do is just go in, kind of scoop it out and make a pile kind of next to it and get it cleared, ready to start putting in some compost and planting the tree.
Sounds great. So when we're planting our tree, we need to make sure that the roots are at just the right depth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the stake here to just show me what the level of the ground is above my hole. And I'm going to grab the tree. Now the right depth that you want for this is to find the shoulder of the roots and then just plant just above there. So that's, you want to be planting at the original depth that the tree grew in. So I can see that that line is just about there. So I'm going to line that up with my stake. And now I can see that the hole needs to come out. We need about another couple of inches to take out of there. So I'm going to grab my spade again. We can make that a little bit deeper, just so I've got space to put a bit of compost in the bottom of there.
So you now dug yourself a nice hole that is slightly deeper than you want, and that's on purpose. So we're now going to start using the compost and mix it in with a little bit of the original soil, so it kind of creates a nice base to plant the tree. So this is actually a trial and adjust way of planting, because you don't want it to get too thick of a layer of compost and soil and then it being too high. So every time you put in, I'd start off with 2 proper spadefuls of compost, maybe a spadeful of soil, mix it together, measure the depth of the tree. If you need more, put in another spade of compost at a time and continue.
Great, sounds good. So I just put in the first batch of compost, mix that in with the soil. I'm just going to measure it to see if I need any more. So back out with my stake. Yeah, I think we need a couple more spadefuls in there. Feels like I'm making some sort of cake.
So again, we're always making sure that we're putting the rootstock back into the water just to keep it nice and hydrated. You don't want them to dry out. So how's that for you in terms of a level?
That looks pretty good actually.
Cool.
Yeah.
You don't have to be perfect with this. Perfection doesn't happen in nature, okay? So don't worry about it too much. I'm just going to show a little trick before we start filling in the hole to help give this tree a good life. So if you pop it back into the water, perfect. Now, as an organic gardener, I'm always kind of looking for low-cost ways to improve the health of the soil. The health of the soil is the most important thing, because that means healthy plants and then healthy humans, and that's something I'm really passionate about. calcium is something that a plant needs every single day. It's one of the most important nutrients above many of the other nutrients. And the great thing about calcium is that it not only helps with things like fruit development and flowering, but it helps create strong cell walls, which means that in theory your plant is actually going to be better at defending itself against pests and diseases. So what I actually have here is I've crushed up a load of eggshells, and I'm actually going to spread this into the hole, and over time the biology in the soil is going to gradually break down these crushed eggshells and release the calcium in a plant available form that then the roots can take up, and it just helps build a nice strong plant from the get-go. Because think of it like a child. The first years of a child's life are the most important, and it's the exact same principle when it comes to planting a tree. So I'm just going to spread these over the hole.
Fantastic, great tip. I'm just going to mix in those eggshells, give them a good mix. Nice. Now I'm going to give that a good splash of water. And I'm just going to quickly put the tree back in. Right, so now for the slightly tricky bit, I am going to find the correct place for the stake. So I have found a nice gap in the roots there, so it's not going to squash any of the roots there. And I'm also going to put it on the side that's into the prevailing wind. So looking around here, I can see that most of the trees around here are blowing that way. That's because the wind comes up the valley towards that lovely wind farm up there. And that means that when the wind blows, it's not going to blow the tree into the stake. It's going to be blowing it away from. So I'm just banging this in until it has good strength. I still think a few more inches. So because we've got rabbits around here, we're going to use this spiral tree guard. And to get this on, it's a little bit tricky, but you just need to find the end and just pop that in at the bottom. And then just work the whole guard around the trunk all the way up. And that is perfect. Good stuff. So, gonna pop the tree back in its hole. There we go, looking nice and cozy there. And now I'm just going to backfill the tree so it's nice and stable. So I've got some of my peat-free compost. I'm going to tip some of that in. And I'm going to make sure it gets right in between all the roots, so we don't have any air holes there, that if we get any late frosts, the frost could get into those air holes and it wouldn't be very good for the tree. So I'm going to get that right into the roots, get right under there, pack it in, keep it nice and stable. So what I'm going to do now is add some of the soil back in, and what I'm going to do is just slice off the turf and then use the soil underneath. And then what I'll actually do is put the grass back on, but upside down, so the roots are pointing upwards. That way the grass is then going to break down and it'll help feed the tree. So with the rest of the loose soil, I'm going to put that back in, make it nice and flat, and then I can pop on our flipped turf. So now I'm going to get these bits of turf back on, flipped upside down as I said, and place that neatly around the tree. And one more on this side. And last one. I'm now just going to gently firm that in. I'm keeping my toes pointed towards the tree at all times. That just minimizes damage to the tree. So the next thing to do is to secure the tree to the stake. And to do that, I'm going to use this rubber tie. This is nice and flexible and it's going to move with the tree. It also, because it's made out of rubber, it's not going to rub into the bark and cause any damage. So yours might look like this, or it might also have a spacer in the middle as well. Spacers are good. The first thing to do is to secure the rubber band to the stake. And I want to do that really securely, really tight. With the join facing towards the tree. So the stake side is as tight as possible. But then when I come around the tree, I'm going to keep that looser. And we're in effect making a figure of 8. And that's just about right. So the tree has got room to move. If it didn't move, then it wouldn't create really strong roots. So it needs that movement to really settle it. So we want it tight on the stake and loose around the tree. We also need to make sure that we remove this after its first year, possibly 2, see how the tree is going. We want to make sure that it's not strangling the tree. So keep that sort of loose but stable at all times. So now it's time to give the tree a good drink. So ideally you'd have a watering can or a hose. I've got my bucket here, but this should work absolutely fine. Lovely. And the last thing we need to do now is to think about mulch. So mulch is a layer that you put on top, and that helps to keep in the moisture, and it also helps to suppress the weeds from growing and grass growing back. So it gives the tree the best start. So things that you can use could be wood chip, a layer of wood chip about 5 centimeters, perfect, or something like this, which I got online. And this is a mulch mat. And this one's actually made out of recycled coffee sacks. So it's all natural material. It'll break down within a year. There are alternatives as well. So
I had no idea, sorry.
Yeah, no.
I had no idea that you could get mulch mats made out of used coffee grounds.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Wow.
I'll see if it smells. Actually, it does smell a bit like coffee.
Oh,
yeah.
I don't want to get near to it. Too late in the day.
It's fantastic. So what is it that you use for mulching?
Well, I love wood chip because that kind of mimics the environment that a tree would be in a woodland, and that would help it actually grow better because of the fungi involved. But another thing you can do, I'd use wood chip if I'm growing a lot, just because it's so cheap and easy to get. Another thing is you might get packaging coming through the post that has this wool packaging. Well, the great thing is you can discard this plastic, you can put it in your recycling bin, but then this wool is an excellent, sustainable, natural mulch made from a waste product. How good is that? That you can then put around the tree as well. So you can kind of just split it in half, lay it around. But for now, let's see how that works.
Yeah, fantastic. So this one's got a little hole in the middle there. I think that was probably made for a smaller tree. But so what you might want to do is just like rip that a bit more to make that a little bit bigger to suit the size of your trunk. And that just then fits around the base of your tree. What you want to do is just make sure that there's a bit of a gap, so it's not actually touching the tree, because that could encourage rotting. So a little bit of a gap there, that goes all the way around. And then ideally, if you had some wood chip here, I'd put that on top as well. And that would be a nice way of keeping in all that good moisture and also keeping those weeds back.
Simple, easy, effective, just how I like it.
Perfect. So now all we need to do is let the tree grow. If we get any dry spells over the summer, so we just want to make sure that it's getting all the moisture that it needs. So in its first 6 months, if it's particularly dry, you want to give it about 10 litres of water 2 or 3 times a week, and that should keep it well hydrated. So there are some great websites that you can go to get some extra tips. The Royal Horticultural Society has a great site where you can put in the species of your tree and it'll tell you the best way to care for it. There's also websites like the Woodland Trust, has loads and loads of information to help you out. We would like to see how you've been getting on in your gardens. So please do post in our Facebook event page all the photographs of your trees being planted around the country. And also please make sure you include in your post where you've planted them. That way we can create a nice cool map showing where all they're being planted, all the places where it's been planted this weekend. So you might have heard of our Tree Town project. For this project we've been working with 9-year-old Lara and her dad Luke, based in Bridgnorth. And they have been mapping their town for places where they can be planting trees outside of their garden, which is absolutely fantastic. We love that. So we worked with Lara to produce a guide, and this guide will show you how you can go about mapping these areas to find really good tree planting spots around your area, and also how then you can go about getting permission to plant in those spots. So you can get this guide from going to the Possible website, which is wearepossible.org, and just search for Tree Town. Lara and Luke will also be joining us very soon for a webinar where we'll be discussing tips about planting trees and also looking about some of the wider issues around tree planting. And we will also have Katie joining us from Bury, and she has used Lara's guide in Bury to get her own Tree Town project started. So please join us for the webinar. You can find the details on the Facebook event page. All the information will be there. So what do you think, Wolfie? Did we do a good job? Yeah? What do you think? Oh, good boy. Well done. Well, thanks very much for joining us today. Can't wait to see all your trees planted. So please do share those photos. Had a fantastic time. Really enjoyed planting this tree. I highly recommend it. Thanks for joining us, and see you again.